Howdy.
Hey, Peter, how goes it?
I
No
don't know. I can't
tsunami
decide.
warning. No tsunami warning for your island, so that's good news.
Yeah, I can't. I can't decide if if I should be worried or not being on the inside. But I'm sure people in Tofino and on the outside are a bit worried.
And I think I read about an hour ago that there's the warning's gone, so
Oh, okay.
you're good.
So
And
I
when I saw
so
the
I could
map
go
this
back. I can go back to lying on the beach.
when I saw the warning this morning, your part of the island wasn't in the heat map.
No, no, exactly.
Morning, Kathleen.
Good morning.
I something's gone wrong with the invitations. So I don't think anybody else will be joining us. So Kathleen, you're lucky. This is dedicated time to you.
I snuck in somehow.
But before we start, because I know it's going to, we'll just get carried away between the two of us with the interesting things you speak of and the challenges you're facing. I had a really interesting conversation with a member of parliament yesterday
Hmm.
at a client's event where a milestone groundbreaking event at the Port of Johnstown, and uh, bent her ear about Canada's opportunity for investing in human capital and keeping IP talent companies money within Canada and building a domestic capability and developing economic sovereignty and taking a look at what we do with post-secondary institutions and how we move technology into industry and looking at this from the ground up, the whole vertical from investment in human capital, investment in industry, in innovation, and then cultivating our own defense industry and the different, many different dual purpose companies into that giant machine. So it was it was received really well. And so I said I need to work out the draft strategy with Peter and then be able to have a meeting with her. So that was really exciting. It was Lorna Jean Edmonds. Just looking at her card. So yeah, pretty serendipitous. Went there for one reason and came out with something greater. So
Oh
exciting.
no, that's excellent getting a chance to actually talk to them face to face. That's
Yes. Yes. Um,
It would
yeah.
be interesting to be a fly on the wall right now in those meetings. There must be a lot of talk.
There must be. I wonder who they're relying on for that guidance. Bless you.
I think I'm having a serious allergic reaction this week to something. I think Jim Baselli seems to be the talking head that everybody wants to listen
Oh,
Yeah,
to.
I'd be anxious to hear his story because what I've heard from him thus far, I'm not quite buying it. Like,
I don't. Yeah, no, I don't.
so we'll see. We'll see.
but
Oh, I said that straw man. Oh, you know what, Peter? Maybe it's all the tourists. You're allergic to all the tourists storming your island.
so where
Yeah,
are you,
it's on
Peter?
Hornby Island.
Are you
Horn-
at Vancouver Island?
Hornby Island.
Oh, okay, Hornby.
So it's off of the Comox Valley.
Yeah, I'm in the Okanagan, so it's hot here today.
What's how hot is hot for you?
Well, actually, the temperature has been oscillating, which is quite different from our usual summers, but it's in the low to mid 30s right now.
Okay, that's pretty hot.
Yeah, it's warm.
You get a lot of humidity though, don't you? Arid Okanagan.
It's arid, not much humidity. Although this summer, I have to say, I'm pleased. We have received a fair bit of rain, which is great because it wets down the forests. So, tell me about this plan. I want to hear about it.
What's that? The plan?
Yeah, well, I think that there needs to be so much investment within this country in things digital for sure. And personally I'm concerned that we're not owning it as a country, that we're being digitized out of our own industries, and I think that's a problem. So,
What does that mean, digitize out of our own industries? What's an example?
well, I'm not too pleased with how we actually um, communicate digitally, and so the satellite story. I'm not too excited about uh, quasi monopoly on our communication across this country with four players, maybe. Like I frankly believe that there are too many monopolies, Frank, in every industry.
Okay, so I'm going to challenge you because I I don't want to sound like a communist, but um, so I think about this often, that the political motivation for selling off public assets and privatizing them in the digital space. So Rogers, TELUS,
Yeah.
um, we'll just pick those two. TELUS is the one I'm familiar with. The idea was competition was supposed to be in the consumer's best interest, but I don't think, and I think it's because we're a small economy, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have the economies of scale for that to work effectively. So it feels like we are kind of sold a bill of goods. And I'm not convinced if, say, the internet, well, say telecom wasn't publicly owned and had the right governance and the right leadership in place, we wouldn't be better serviced. So I'm having a hard time convincing myself that privatization or foreign corporations like Walmart, have really improved the economy, and also more so actually offered more benefit to the consumer.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm not crazy, because I
No.
think if I brought that up, people would be like, "Oh, you're a communist. You want everything to be, publicly owned." And it's like, not everything, but there's a few things that aren't quite adding up. And
Well,
I look at the like this leakage analysis, which I've been hammering pretty hard on lately. Just go to Chat GBT and say, what are we importing into the province, into the country? And you realize that we're basically giving away all the profit. Like we're so people complain about the 51st state. I'd argue we already are the 51st state economically. I mean, just go to the suburbs, show me a Canadian company, other than Canadian Tire.
yeah,
So
and
I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of,
that's
I'm
likely
curious.
US owned as well.
It's actually not. No.
I was being
No,
sarcastic.
I was gonna say it is public, so it is probably owned a lot, majority outside of Canada. But I do own their shares, and they're performing very well for the last 16 months. So
Good, good.
yeah,
No,
yeah, they're
I'm
up.
sure this elbows up has generated a lot more business in their direction. But I want to tell you a story, and this was when I was up in Nunavut. In fact, I just arrived, but so we were working with the feds on getting better satellite service up there. I mean, it's on the lower end of the curve as far as satellites are concerned. And so there was this huge, where it came from, like the usual places, to just engage Bell. And Bell was pretty keen on that contract as well. But um, And the contract was actually being run by Indian Northern Affairs at the time because they had the liaison with territories. But anyway, there was this small company out of, it wasn't even Yellowknife, it was just outside of Yellowknife. At any rate, a technology company. And they had bid on the contract. And so I arrived just before, when they were kind of reviewing this. And so I had a chat with the players or the main players representing them. I was so impressed with this small company out of the Northwest Territories that offered an entirely different vision of how to improve communications in the Northern Hemisphere. And ultimately had a better proposal. And long story short, we actually had to sit down with CRTC on this too. And but we ended up awarding to this really small company, still around, SI Micro, and smart guy, young. Well, he was young then, a couple years ago. And but anyway, so we sat down with CRTC, and the meeting was in Yellowknife because this affected all of the territories and parts of northern BC, actually, just the way it was set up, I guess. And so we were, presenting the case that we needed a bit more competition. We needed focus on the territories and not just, yeah, well, that's just the North. And it was so interesting. And it's not as though we planned this because who can plan this? But the existing satellite wobbled. It threw out communications everywhere. And it was right in the midst of our meeting with CRTC. And it was so incredibly effective. We said, hey, no, really, because we were there in person, thank God. Said, well, we didn't plan this. So now, but I had a meeting with my leadership team in Yellowknife so that we could do these two things at once, which was outside of Nunavut. But so luckily, my director of emergencies or whatever had this big frickin' satellite phone. And that was the only way we could communicate back to the premier and um, and and all of the ministers and sort of keep them posted on what was going on because it shut down everything. The satellite wobbled. You couldn't access banks. Of course, all commerce is done through computers. You could not do that. It was all back to hard copy. It's huge, right?
So even for first responders, just no access to communicate.
No, the only way was this horkin' big old technology called a satellite phone that was obviously bouncing off somewhere else. And that was the only way that we could communicate with folks. So anyway, the story being that we need to pay attention to these things, and we
Yeah.
absolutely need to encourage new innovation. And when it already exists and it's developing within this country, let's support it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Developing it, supporting it, keeping it here, and commercializing it and exporting it.
Yeah, exactly.
And get your ham radio operator's license.
Yes. Yeah.
That too. No, it's kind of interesting. I actually follow him, the owner of this company, on LinkedIn. I should reach out to him because designed, um, he set up an office and a satellite in Ottawa, actually, to connect here. But his whole notion was a web instead of a back and forth. So it was just a different view of how this communication should work, so that it was more direct than going back to source and then out to whatever, boom, boom, right? However, he also designed a blanket, if you will, that snuffs electrical fires. So with all of these
Oh yeah.
electric blanket or electric cars and whatever, and with fires being a huge issue.
Yeah,
So
the cars are a big deal.
Yeah, so he's designed this blanket, and I got to get that out to this big audience of people who manage buildings because you just throw this blanket on the and it snuffs it right away, which I mean that's amazing.
They need to. He needs to sell those to all the BC ferries. I always see all the electric cars
Oh,
on BC ferries now, thinking, man, if one of those caught fire and a couple
yeah,
more caught fire, that ferry would be burnt to the ground. Like
to the
they
bottom of the
don't.
sea.
Yeah, because they don't have their firefighting capacity
Right? Oh shit. You know what?
isn't for electricity.
I'm
I'd
gonna
be
reach
I'd be
out to him.
curious to know if they actually have even they must have thought of it, but yeah, he should be selling it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, so I think I think that well, let's beat up Jim Baselli for a while. So
okay.
what I'm seeing is the political class is easily persuaded by shiny objects, and that might be a function of human nature. So if you brought rigor into their thinking, you'd probably just piss them off, and they'd alienate you because you're messing with their buzz, right? They're high on the prestige, and they don't want somebody bringing, and you can kind of see that when you poke some of them. So I think about like the amount of effort that he put into IP protection in Canada over the last decade, which now you see is in the mainstream. And the irony of that is when he first started banging that drum, he was already 20 to 30 years too late, which is what I was kind of advocating when Colin Deacon was supporting it. I said, look, he's not wrong, but we're actually 30 years behind, and we need to leapfrog uh, beyond kind of how government develops funded programs. And the IP is just the most beautiful example of failing to be failed model that's currently being, invested in like crazy, but it's going to fail. And the failure is once the government got a hold of it, deliver it. So you're going to see massive investments in education around IP, and that's not actually hammer isn't even on the right spike. Like if they're serious about investing in IP, then the real issue is publicly funded venture capital, because it doesn't matter how much IP you have if you're selling your company to foreign interests. So that's actually the real issue. And the reason I believe, and I've never been able to confront him on it publicly, is that because he is a venture capitalist, he isn't talking about it, because he'd have to basically burn down his own house to truly uh, solve the problem. Why that frustrates me is because he now has the mic. Like, Jim Baselli is the chosen government talking head. And I've seen it before with other things. This is new, and you guys both know this as ex-public servants. And so it actually causes a real problem. And so, um, if I said, well, I don't disagree with IP, however, the better tactic would be to give founders gift certificates to go hire IP strategists to do IP mapping to figure out what the best strategy is. And they'd be like, oh, well, that doesn't fit our enjoyment of building programs and hiring staff and creating jobs. And like they were working out of OCI while I was there in Ontario, the Ontario IPON. And I mean, it was a joke. Like it was just like, what a make work project for a bunch of people that now are employed by I don't know if it's Crown Corp or non-profit. I guess it's Crown Corp. Like they basically were doing their in-house counsel spent more time at my desk trying to figure out how to get another job. Like they weren't doing anything. And and so it was so obvious. and I think, well, how do we move to that model where it's like we don't need to hire bureaucrats to run programs. What we need to do is underwrite the fees that consultants are charging founders to do good work, right? And whether it's accounting, legal, or a strategy, here's a coupon. Go give that to an IP strategist. They can give it to the government. We'll send them a check. So there's your gap analysis, right? Like compare that to what's happening. And then the other piece is that this is all going to be done in AI. So, we're going to basically have an AI driven crown corporation offering IP education when it's unnecessary. And most IP isn't Canadian published anyway, right? Like you find me one life science company that issues patents in Canada, not in the US, and I'll literally cut my hand off, right? I mean, they all go to the US to get patents, right? And so there's all these kind of things where I think, okay, so what happened is the initial idea of IP, which Jim Baselli, bless his heart, has been driving for over a decade. It's just now come into the consciousness, is not a bad idea. How it gets implemented is a horrible idea. And that's what I find, fascinating. And he'll keep doing it with other things. And so if I came along and said, well, actually, I think you're wasting your time and money, suddenly I'm alienated for being the naysayer that, shits on everybody's party. And then if I say the bigger problem is venture capital, then I get, canceled, because that basically negates the entire mandate of the Business Development Bank and Economic or Export Development Canada. Like those are their mandates. And, so now they're scrambling because they realize they basically been doing a disservice to the country for the last 10 years. Like, it's really interesting politically. So it's kind of like, how do you bring these into the consciousness where they still feel like they're doing the right thing and the party's still going and the music's still playing? Because I think there's a very there's a very interesting way to craft the argument. And you could say that about Pierre Poilievre, right? Like, I wouldn't vote for him just because he's so good at being the opposition. Why would you ever put him in power, right? I mean, it's the Peter principle, like he's a pit bull that just kept chipping away at Trudeau's ankles, but when he suddenly was like, well, I want to be the prime minister now, it's like, hell no, you're the nasty little dog we don't feed, we're not going to ever give you the power, so you can kind of see how this works. So I don't know, that's kind of my observation. What do you guys think?
I think it's how you present the change in perspective, and I'm just thinking about this from a more general. How do you persuade? How do you persuade for change? And what I found is that you have to. I don't know. I mean, you have to know the crowd. You have to get to know the crowd, but you can't. Or it's less effective if you suggest that they're doing it wrong. I think you have to compliment them in some way that firstly catches their attention, so that they go, "Oh, I like that guy. He just said something really nice about me." And then I think you have to use that attention to offer alternative and ways of getting there. And so that's lots of conversations, but these take lots of conversations. And I think that along with it, if you've got some evidence, this is what it looks like, and this is how it works, so that you can, because it's just persuasion.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so totally agree. It's all the trust and the relationships. What's interesting though is he's now invested probably close to $100 million in lobbying the government, whereas people like us, we have none of that. So somebody told me a while ago this year that it was the actual political party donors that write political election platforms. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I don't know, I'm not sure I totally believe it. But then I was in a meeting, and again, being a fly on the wall, one of Baselli's partners at the venture capital firm, a guy Mark Mayhew, I think his name is, he basically said to another woman on the call, and he didn't know who I was, that they were writing the policies for the Conservative Party. And so those guys play both camps, by the way. They were actually writing the policy for the Conservative platform. And I thought, I guess what he said was correct. It is the donors that write the policies.
Mm.
And so you kind of realize there's all this, like, I mean, a woman once said to me on LinkedIn, she's like, well, that's what's good about democracy. You can run, for premier if you don't like it or something. And I was like, wow, do you really think it's that simple? Like, do you know how hard it is to even get into a political as a middle-aged white guy? Like, not gonna happen. So it's just kind of, it's interesting, all those details that are yeah, like how does somebody with no voice and no money be heard, without sounding like a nut job, kind of thing. Yeah,
I
it's
think
tricky.
it's about, well, we'll talk about this in two ways. One, it is about influence. It's about opening up their listening, and you can't go at them saying you suck for the following reasons and the sky's falling. It has to be, have you thought about this? But it's developing those relationships.
Yeah.
The other side, I really think it has to be an organic movement about linking arms and standing shoulder to shoulder with others across the country, and being able to get people to buy in that there is the ability to change things and to coordinate the messaging and the pain point you're solving, while also understanding the enemy, the forces Peter's talking about, who influence the campaigns that back the governing parties, uh, and identify what their interests are, the flow of money, and what they're currently gaining and what they're at risk of losing, and then trying to find a win-win scenario so you get in. But it has to be a win-win where everybody's winning, and then incrementally stepping that up with the evidence, with increased parties, proponents, stakeholders coming together for the same messaging, and really limiting that messaging. Can't go at healthcare, education, military spending, postal, pick three things, no more than three things. Focus on that. So very narrow scope, the right people, the right messaging, and then your supporters or proponents on the inside that you've developed.
So what's the motivation?
For them, the motivation is power. Everybody wants money or power.
No, what's the motivation for us?
To sleep better because we can't help ourselves. I can't.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it is an interesting question, because so a guy like Baselli and the other guy from Shopify, what's happened for them is they've hung out with enough Americans that they realize wealth is an interesting way to get a tax benefit by becoming a lobbyist. And it was very trendy in the US, and now these guys have adopted it. I think it's called Build Canada is the other one they fund.
Oh, those.
And so, so there's these two agencies that are basically, instead of them giving the government more tax dollars, they're getting tax receipts by starting these nonprofits that are doing lobbying. And again, they just copied, Elon Musk basically. But I find that interesting, because for them, it becomes sport. I mean, they should be out hunting and fishing, but instead they're popping off politicians. So it's actually a bit sadistic if you dive into the psychology of it. But that was the thing I was thinking about. Like, what's the motivation for just like there's a whole group of technical founders in Canada that are brilliant. Like, these are the people that actually are working in the startups and in the small businesses that are just brilliant. And and I've talked to them. Like, I remember having a conversation. The government was talking about prompt payment
Yes.
technology, and they were going to spend like $50 million with some company in Europe. And so I, put a little group of the smart tech guys together, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we could build an app in like 2 hours." And it just dawned on me at that moment where I'm like, "This is one of the issues. Like, they're not leveraging the
No, and
talent,
this
and
is what
the
Kathleen said.
talent's not interested, right?
And what
There's
Kathleen was saying earlier about having outside digital solutions coming in. So we used to be Silicon
yeah,
Valley North. We have the
yeah,
talent. We've got the institutions. We've got beautiful places like the University of Waterloo linked to the Vector Institute that doesn't hold
yeah,
IP, that churns out brilliant minds. And this is after our discussion last week, Kathleen, Peter and I, well, Peter, me just listening to Peter and just pulling in all this information for things that we've spoken about and realizing that's the effing ticket is what's the greatest pain point and how to identify that short, medium, and long term socioeconomic decline in our society. And it's going to come from academic institutions and how we invest in human capital not being relevant, not pivoting with the current times, and the lack of revenue from our latest change in immigration policy. You don't have these foreign students coming with high tuition,
Oh boy, did they rely on that. That was huge. Like the
huge.
amount
And no
they
one's
had
talking
they
about
had
it.
people on, yeah, people on staff whose sole purpose was recruitment from other countries.
Yes. And so that's going to, in the next, in the short term, leave a significant void. And that's when my spidey sense, or not my, that light bulb went off inside and over my head, and thought this is where we start because you have to follow the money. And the money is now not going to these institutions that are at the risk of collapse that will be interested. And their board members and faculty are connected to industry. So
Right.
as you win their favor and be able to solve their problem, get that connection, be able to bring academia and industry together for that technology and talent transfer. That's where I see it as that baseline for this initiative of being able to create change without financial backing and to also monetize it to make this sustainable and something worth pursuing instead of just Peter and I spinning our wheels thinking, hey, the world's going to or Canada's going to shit and no one's paying attention because they're focused on what the people with the deep pockets are telling them to do because ultimately they run the country, they run the world. So that's
Well,
my
so here's an interesting, um, because this kind of hits for both of you guys. So, Kathleen, you were talking about prefab construction before,
Yep.
and
Still
you
am.
know, yeah, exactly. Again, I just did it like literally a 20-second chat GBT, and I said, "What are we importing into Canada?" And one of the biggest things we're importing is prefab construction materials. And and I thought, okay, so all of the, and again, this is why I'm kind of sarcastic about the tech bro party scene because it's really freaking me out right now. That we just keep pouring money into like, quantum computing and AI and these things. And the problem I see with Canadian public spending is they give just enough money to get the political win, but they don't actually fund them properly. So, we're going to get crushed in any of these hot items. But it's like, okay, so, let's focus on what we can do. And when you said the other day, it's like, oh, it's a province of retirees. And, and we know housing and building is an issue. We know real estate is actually our biggest economic driver right now, like all of these things. And I'm like, why would an elected official not be doubling down on prefab construction materials, technology, like exportable technology, high tech technology, versus spending money on tech bro conferences, attracting venture capitalists to buy Canadian companies? Like to me, when you do that gap analysis, and I know I don't sound crazy, like it's like, okay, this is so obvious. And so I find it fascinating how they can get away with spending public money on these pet projects that they enjoy. Like I'm sure Brenda Daly loves going to the party, and and now she's gone so far as moved Innovate VC under her own Ministry of Finance, so she can protect the the PR of it, which is mind-boggling. You can talk about a rogue politician, and and so I look at this stuff and I think it took me 20 seconds to go to Chat GBT and figure out what we're importing to BC.
Okay, I'm going to check that because
Yeah,
Chat GPT, from my knowledge, is lying to you because there has been a lot of prefab. Actually, it's astounding. There's been prefab since the 80s, at least in Canada.
yeah, and there's
And
public investment in it.
yes, and frankly, so one of the first housing projects I ever did as an early career, but it was developing housing in the north, and everything has to arrive. I mean, if you're going to afford it, via sea lift in the summer. So we found this prefab factory that did walls, floors, roof systems, insulated metal, and put together a design and shipped it out in on sea lift in the summer, and the whole thing went up in like 2 weeks. That's it. So this was the 80s. So there are companies that do and have done prefab in Canada, and there's more and more of them. However, how prefab is defined. So most of them, unfortunately, are just stick building under a roof. Now that's not prefab. That's off-site. And I'm not a fan of that because, quite frankly, there's no innovation there. Like we
And
need,
it's just labor, so there's no
yeah,
exportable technology to
yeah,
invest in, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
now
I get it.
SIPs are an innovation, but they've been around for a long time. So
Yeah,
there are off-site factories that actually use technology and not just yeah, we'll just put a roof over it. They're building in different ways. They're using different materials. So that's already happening in Canada. So I frankly, but I'll chase Chat GPT and see if it tells me the same story. But I
so
frankly,
that so yeah, so regardless, the issue in my mind is we should be doubling down on something we could get really good at. So when I
yes,
say healthcare, post-secondary,
yes,
housing, those are the things we should be known globally as the world leader in,
yeah.
right? Especially healthcare. Like for me, because that's kind of where I come from. I mean, I know it sounds ludicrous to most people, but the minute we turn healthcare into a business incubator that's like basically using economic leakage to figure out what we're buying and importing, and then deciding that's something we should be making and exporting domestically, there's a whole economy right there. So I guess what I'm worried about is that we have these politicians that have gone rogue with pet projects that have no data to support them and no recourse other than the media to shame them out of doing it. And by the time they've done it, there's not much you can do, right? So, so it's like, to me, if you haven't looked at what you're importing into your province or into your country and then analyzed, entrepreneurial opportunities within that, the rest is a mute issue for me. You're just full of shit.
And
So
that's really the starting point for that analysis is look at the IP that we import across all industries,
Yeah,
identify where to focus on because it is what we can develop in-house in Canada domestically, especially housing. We've got such a varying climate that
yeah.
it's it's a no-brainer. We've got fantastic institutions that test different housing methodology and
we've got
materials.
raw
And
materials.
that's why I go back to the commercialization as a service model, because one of it is the four due diligence tools that nobody's using right now because they're so expensive. But you could do again, this is IP. You could do an intellectual property global scan to figure out what the opportunities are within the space based on good thinking applied to that data. And this is the kind of stuff where I'm just like, holy crap. So I'll give you an example. Again, healthcare is easier for me than housing. So if you did an analysis we'll never probably be competitive on gauze because we don't produce cotton domestically, blah blah blah. So let's just say, yeah, that's a $800 million leakage, but it's not going to get fixed. However, we buy from Siemens, Medtronics, Philips. These companies, their patents have run out. We're doing it because of the service contracts. Those are things we could actually move forward. And I'll give you an example. A friend of mine in Victoria got a contract to build domestic ventilators,
Okay.
and the minute COVID ended, it got shelved. But they actually have repurposed patents that were out of, that had run their course, and built a ventilator that was ready for commercialization in Canada that got shelved because procurement doesn't, there's again problem with public procurement. And so that's one example. The other one is when I was in the business, I literally watched all the ceramic molds for gloves leaving Ontario going to Taiwan. Like they literally boxed them up and sold them to Taiwan. And so we lost our ability to make gloves. But that's not that is something we could probably get back, by building their porcelain hands that gloves are made with. So that was an interesting one. But I think about like pharmaceuticals. So another example, and this is where the lobbying comes in. There's a woman in Vancouver. Her name escapes me, but she's quite famous. She was married to a guy named Frank Giustro, which is a big writing Lionsgate Entertainment guy. Anyway, I can picture her, but excuse me. She worked on a project philanthropically around generic pharmaceuticals, and a friend of mine that's a lawyer was working with her on it. And so he was kind of telling me the Reader's Digest and what they're doing, and it got shelved. Like they were told to stop doing it, and and so like right there, we could probably save healthcare from bankruptcy by ignoring the pharmaceutical lobby in Canada and going to generic drugs. Like so where's the will, right? Like what, and I'm sure, and I don't know because I've never been a politician, but I'm sure the minute you start messing with this stuff politically, you're just kicked out of the world, right? Like you're just, you're, as somebody said, there's lots of black boxes waiting for people to retire if they pay attention while they're in power. That it's like, how do all these politicians get so rich? And but yeah,
Well,
so I don't know what the answer is there, but it seems like it's gotten so bad that people are just doing whatever they want at this.
I could tell you a story, but this is recorded, so I won't tell you the story because there's no I want this to be out there.
That's all you need. Enough said, right?
Pause it. I can pause it.
Enough said.
No, I think that just like everyday life, I think it's important to get to know people and get to know what motivates them, right? And I still hold sway for people doing things for the right reasons. Corruptibility is huge. I will tell you this one story. Um, I I had a contracts lawyer that virtually was in my office all the time, like because we had handled most of the contracts. We were like the public works and government services.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were meeting with this company and this CEO that had held this contract, and they were not living up to it at all. And anyway, so I just recall this one meeting where the CEO of this company said that he believed that his contract was in perpetuity. And I said to him, that is incredible. I said,
Yeah.
we as humans don't even have a contract in perpetuity. How did you manage that?
He has a direct line to God, I guess.
Oh, that was just too wild. But so there are themes out there. They're as old as history. There is there is politics around serving me. So that's the corruption end of things. There's politics around serving people, which is probably what politics should be all about. And so it's finding those folks who are in the rights camp and supporting that forward. And well, I won't give you my theory of politics, but certainly democracies are strong in the fact that they are to represent the people. And so, anyway, I think that's key. Just like in any business, you have to connect with the right people to actually have informed conversations and put together stories to take them further. Technology is key because, as you were talking, Peter, about various things from healthcare, and you know, and excuse me, I'm a systems thinker, so I keep seeing connections all over the place. But and I follow the NHS in Britain because so much of what they're going through, we too are. It's just time. Things change, industries don't, people don't. So we have to catch up. So I've been watching what's going on there. Technology is a huge part of it, but so is organizational structures and people management. And if you can't connect those two together, it's going to fail. So, we need smart technology. And so I'll be frank, I'm not a fan of the techie bros. Like, fuck off. Just because you know how to code doesn't suggest that you know anything about various businesses. So, and because technology was a huge part of my portfolio, I've seen so many failures, and most of it, quite frankly, has to do with people structures. So I think that we need to find a couple of influential people in the right places and start working with them. So, and I'm
that
seeing
aren't
this.
that aren't that aren't executive directors wanting to be ADMs, wanting to be DMs.
Well, yeah, there are those people out there, but there's also some politicians who are, I think, motivated correctly. They're harder to find, maybe. I don't know. But there are interconnections, and I think that if you can catch someone's attention that you have, a few thoughts that they are in this for the right reasons, and you can start dropping the threads of interconnections, then they can start saying, holy shit, you know what? If I supported this, not only would it look great over here, but it would look great over here, 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 because of these interconnections. And so technology is one of those. It's a very strong thread in this whole, the way we run our country tapestry. And I think we can own it. But it connects to post-secondary. They need help right now. It connects to the building industry because they are so non-productive that, but it's a mind shift. So yes, we can do the technology, but unless we also help to adjust the mindset, it's just going to flounder, right? So that's the way I'm seeing it. And it just takes a couple of really good success stories that moves the crowd saying, hoo, okay, I'm going there, right?
Yeah, that's my strategy is, invent a parallel system that's so attractive that everybody benefits from,
Yeah.
that they just come over anyway. And, I always kind of preface, like, for me, post-secondary is a big one. And,
Yes.
I can see where the, challenges are. And I they're not hard to figure out, but I always think, let's start from a place where we're not going to lay off the workforce. We're actually going to look for a solution where nobody gets laid off. Knowledge transfer actually improves, and people are happier at work. And and you look at these organizations, and so many people are rolling their eyes internally, don't feel like they have any say, don't know how to get out of the quagmire. I mean, I hear it from the rank and file continually on every publicly funded organization in the country. And I think,
Well,
okay, so with post-secondary, if you remove the need for a PhD to be the president of a university and you create a flat hierarchy, would that instantaneously change the culture in the right direction and remove the need for all those layoffs? That is like so against the command and control, monarchy driven, culture of post secondary. But it's pretty obvious that's the solution that's worth piloting, because
Oh,
you put in a flat hierarchy and a
I'm
mandate to not lay people off, you'd be
I
pretty good
agree
start.
with that. I think it's so drastic, though. Change doesn't come easily, and it has to be incremental. It has to be bite
You'd
sized.
have to retire. You'd have to retire a lot of people.
You
Well,
would,
and and
but the
and
timing's
the
right.
and the university president cabal attached to politics, especially in BC, it's intense. Like,
yes.
I mean, I had to laugh. The new governor of Royal Roads is the next public servant. The guy running it's the next public servant. The woman at SFU is the next public. Like, it's just it's incestuous at this point, right?
Oh
And
God,
so you're going to have a massive pushback trying to unseat all that, right? And they know where their bread's buttered. I mean, there's a reason why she's given that role, because she knows how to integrate with the higher levels of government.
well, there's actually my experience with post-secondary is there's such a collection of egos there, and just managing the built environment to support post-secondary.
Yeah.
I
Well, and
was
those egos have to be there for it to survive, right?
Well, yes and no. Again, I
Under
think
its current model. Under its current model.
yes, under its current model. But boy, even things like hoarding space, like what? It was quite insane. But anyway, yeah. So there's challenges, and I was just having a conversation, just oh Jesus, on Friday with this architect planner that I know. He lives in actually I think he still lives in his boat just out yeah, around Richmond. Anyway, brilliant guy. And so we were talking about the challenges right now with housing and everything else post-secondary. So the other the other person in the call is in the post-secondary area. And so we were talking about how to introduce some of these ideas and changes that would actually benefit, city planning and post-secondary and housing. And oh, the stories we both, all three of us had, so we can't, as we want to introduce these great ideas and we want to encourage change. I think that we really do need to focus on culture
You
and
do. It's people. We're
yeah,
human. It's everything is human first, and we make
yeah,
decisions emotionally supported by logic.
yeah,
No matter what anyone says, emotion plays a huge part of it, even if it's
yeah,
database. If you're not looking at the human element and asking internally what people want, combined with incentives and not focusing on logic. Logic won't get you anywhere. It's looking at the pain points each organization's facing. If it's a
yeah.
municipality, if it's the post-secondary institution, if it's the housing sector, what is their pain point? And being able to identify how solving a pain point in all three parties with a single solution can create that win-win-win scenario. Because coming at them with, hey, if we do it this way, it'll be more efficient, we'll save more, and so forth, won't work. Everything is done at the decision level through triage of the sky's falling and how can I stop this from a risk to reputation, health and safety, or financial. And using that lens of how do I cover my ass? That's the first thing every politician, decision maker, senior executive is thinking on a day-to-day basis when their phone starts ringing after they've.
Yeah, it is. I hate to say this, but it really is. It's all about me.
It is absolutely.
So how can we recognize very quickly, and you can, I mean, interaction with people, I think right away where they're coming from and why.
Well, and this is a list I keep next to me amongst some other reminders that there's six main motivators for humans, and people live to either have certainty, so they don't like change, to have variety because they just like change, they adventure, they don't want to be static. These are the people that will be nomadic and be renters and never buy. They want significance, they're driven by ego. They need connection. So those are your yes people and your people pleasers. They're driven by growth And lastly, contribution. If you can identify whoever you're dealing with, what their main driver is and how they lead their life, then you're able to understand what they're after and how to influence them or get them to be on your side. Because if you
Yeah.
do this, this will get you exposure for those significance driven people.
Well, hang on to that, because that is the heart of all of this. What we're talking about, technology and so on, yes, that's the smart. But unless you can get to the heart of change, all of that is wasted energy.
Moot. Yes. Yeah. It's
So it does boil down to people, and I think that's why, I've connected so strongly with Julie, because she's incredibly brilliant. We've had conversations like this, and we toss things around to see how we can actually incrementally make a difference, dealing with similar problems, even though, we come from different places. But the thing that's the biggest thread through all of this is people, right? And
It is. Everything comes down to humans, people,
it's,
psychology. And then
yeah,
within those six elements of what drives an individual comes down, then there's the next factor is everyone wants more time freedom. They want more money, and they want to be able to do something with that or create magic in their life.
yeah,
And in the businesses, it's the same thing. We want more revenue. We want, if it's a CEO or the president of a company, they want more free time. They don't want to get dragged down by issues management and that. So they want more revenue. They want more time freedom to ultimately grow, create greater impact, to disrupt. So once you understand the human, then the next piece is what are they after?
yeah,
After, along with that significance or contribution. And then you can get into the, okay, well, what is the pain that's preventing you from achieving that time freedom, additional money to ultimately spend more time with your kids, to go to Disney World or go to, let's pick a Canadian landmark, to go to the Okanagan and pick fruits and drink wine.
no, it's about drinking wine.
It is. It is.
Oh God. But
Yeah,
so I'm still connected with University of Ottawa, and just as an alumni. And
Okay.
so they just sent out an email either yesterday or today, um, with a focus on some programming on AI. AI,
Everyone's talking about
yeah,
that. Ottawa Board of Trade. I'm a U of O alumni as well. I get the same messaging, but every damn newsletter message is all about AI. No one's talking about wellness and how we're improving as a society and the
yeah,
Maslow's. Let's just come down to basic needs, how we're lacking housing and what the government's doing to support it,
yeah,
or how AI is going to improve these outcomes for Canadians to yield greater long-term socioeconomic gain or benefit. None of
yeah.
it. It's not part
Well,
of the game.
I don't mind just drawing this picture where technology, and I'm not thinking AI, that's part of it, but where technology can have incredible productivity improvements in a short period of time, just by focusing on that. And it would be great if post-secondary could kind of take the lead in teaching and educating around technology and how it can improve productivity. I'm writing an article right now on and this is going to sound weird even to the my audience, on productive buildings. It's people that are productive. But man, if your building doesn't support that, and you won't know if your building supports that unless you. So I'm going to talk about design thinking and so on as well. But you have to start linking these things, because the world is complex, and you can't make a decision over here without having impact in five different other areas. So if we can start to kind of flush out that diagram of how these things interconnect, and then if we can identify where key players can actually have this broad impact by focusing on, and then that's why I'm thinking of post-secondary, because if they can focus on training and educating around technology of all sorts, then it has the potential to improve, healthcare, certainly the building industry, and all kinds of other things too. Now, funding, sure, we can actually, I think, spill the same story to a couple of politicians who would like to, be the conductor of something so positive in this country, right? So, and because the investment in post-secondary has been so dismal, this can actually raise everyone's situation politically, publicly, financially, the whole 9 yards. So we need
Well,
these
and that's
schools.
what's so odd about the status quo and all this stuff we're talking trust and personal leadership, that you're not wrong, but how do you get from A to B knowing you're right? And and I think this is where that level of naivety has to be thought about, because a politician is just part of a political party. Like, I know, from my experience in BC, if you're not, I used to say you had to be in the premier's office, but now I think you have to be in the donor's office. That it that it's gotten so centralized. And I look at economic development, and I can see the premier's interest is on mega projects, because he's trying to make bold moonshots with LNG, and forcing these things through without public consent, that kind of thing. And so the rest of it's kind of small potatoes on his plate. So now it's kind of gone rogue. But I think that like, this is where you kind of have to challenge the thinking a bit, because you think about shareholder return, shareholder value. AI, somebody posted on LinkedIn, about what are we going to do with all these unemployed humans if AI is taking all these service jobs, and to me, it's kind of like back to what Hinesh was saying, that, people want more free time, everybody would love to have a residual income, that sort of thing. So why is that not the premise we're basing our public policies on? And this is why I kind of keep thinking, like, there doesn't seem to be a North Star anymore, where it's kind of like, okay, well, let's talk about reality and human nature, and I pound away on the monarchy, and I get some resistance from some, academics, but, my argument is that, the culture of a monarchy is run its full course. And as you said, Kathleen, that, that these things have just run their time. Like, it's time, the ship needs to course correct, and it seems to be very difficult, is what we're learning, because there's so many people hanging on to the status quo. And I would argue, because of the monarchy, people are hanging on to a status quo that they don't even know they're hanging on to. Like, it's so ingrained culturally, that, I mean, just look at the issue with the monarchy in Canada. What did they do? They issued $300,000 300,000 King's medals, and suddenly every Canadian's got a medal from King Charles, and that placates them for another decade. Like, I mean, it's just, to me, it's wild that how people are so switched off,
Well,
and
so
so I think when you think about, and this is why I always go back to the commercialization as a service. So if we're using public investments to prop up innovation, why wouldn't we build a system that's more effective and efficient, which I think Cass is a defensible argument now, and then the outcome is actually for public benefit. And there seems to be, like I say, there doesn't seem to be a North Star. So if you think about, the shareholder value, the monopolization, feudalism, all these things that we've kind of built out of this monarchy model, whether we realize it or not, like, what if, um, everybody everybody was issued an interest-free mortgage, that there's a citizen, a passport holder was issued an interest-free mortgage, what if, what if we were getting a dividend, from our, you know, institutions, like there's, and I'm not saying they have to be government run, but there's some flow of capital that's missing in the psychology, because we're a very wealthy nation, right? Like there's something, and I mean, I'd say Africa's even worse when it comes to this, but like no Canadian should be suffering. So we've given away too much of our profit, right? And so it's like, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm a hardcore left-wing person. Like I'm not. I'm a capitalist. But there's got to be a way of leveraging business for good that doesn't require any of this hippy dippy shit, and so it's kind of like, what are we missing, and I think about like, what should the government do? So I would argue the government should own all the infrastructure for digital. I think the government should own all the real estate on high streets. There's some things that they would do really well at, and
Well,
and so yeah, how do you build a platform using public resources that actually benefit citizens?
our challenge, I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, quite frankly. Although I wouldn't bring the monarchy into it, because that pokes another balloon over there. Let's not go there. But because no, I'm concerned with, frankly, the amount of Canada that's been sold off to foreign interests.
Yeah.
The change that's going on right now is frankly, it's generational. And there's technology involved, there's climate involved. All of these things are coalescing at the same time, which is not a surprise, actually, but nonetheless, we're here. I think that there is tons of opportunity, absolutely, in this country, because we are still, and this huge geography that is so untouched, which is a good thing, but it's also, it's an opportunity for innovation and for a collective input and benefit. Not everyone thinks the way we do, but we have to keep that.
No, that's why I keep saying I don't want this to be it's not about ideology, right? It's multi-partisan. It's about human
Yes,
flourishing, right? Like I
yes.
don't want anybody to
Yes.
ever typecast me as a political operative. It's like I have no political agenda at all. I just want everybody to have a, higher quality of standard of living.
But and I think that the invite is the benefit for all. Now,
Yeah.
again, I mean the spectrum of people, from criminals to saints. No, there are no saints, but
Yeah.
we have to understand that. But I think that the majority of people probably feel that way as citizens, as a collective, and
Yeah.
want to get there. There definitely, in my view, needs to be government ownership of things like railways and corridors, power corridors, all of that.
Right.
That
The infrastructure.
yeah, yes, infrastructure. That absolutely needs to be. I think there needs uh and it to
So
have,
I would add to that. What about it being owned publicly but not operated publicly?
Yes.
Maybe
yeah,
That's
that's what
where you gain the
maybe that's
efficiency.
the
Yes.
mistake we've been making for the last
yeah.
however many years, is whenever a public investment's involved, we think it has to be managed publicly, and that's failed on every level just because it's not, there's a disconnect. Yeah. So
Maybe we,
so could the shareholder be public but the operator is private?
Just
yeah,
like our highways, it shouldn't be any different. Railroads, digital infrastructure should be the same. I agree with you, Peter. It should be owned by the crown, but operated by by consortia, by the private sector, where there is no
with a
monopoly
with a
on it.
true ethical.
Yeah, and where it's
yeah.
competitive, right? Contracts renew on a set frequency, so people have to, or companies have to be able to do it in an ethical way.
Now, but I do want to throw this example at you. You might know this one, Hinesh, because oh shit, when was that? Probably the 90s, whatever, when the feds decided that they would outsource facility management, and they went to,
SNC or
yes, yes, and see.
yes.
So I had friends that worked there, and what a freaking gong show that was. So, but I also know from working in different organizations, government organizations, that when they wanted to transition to public works government services running everything and then that, privatizing that, firstly, they had no clue what public works and government services did. They thought they
Right.
just bought stuff. Well, so, and they thought, man, if we just did a bulk buy of all of this stuff, we'd save so much money. Well, they don't understand nuance, details. And so
No, they don't.
that that was in concept, at the stratosphere, that might make sense. But when you get into the weeds, it failed expensively. So I
It
think that
did, and then the following organizations, say Brookfield, it's the
yes,
same thing. It's because the contract wasn't created to have positive and negative incentives
yes.
for the contractor, and it was shaped by the competition, by SNC, by BGIS, to benefit themselves, where they make the money over a very long period of time. The crown loses big.
Well, and my take on that, just from watching it unfold and being involved in some fashion, if profits are extracted from a public service, then someone's losing here, right?
Right.
So, let's. I think we have to keep.
That's a good line to put at the front of the page.
Yeah, no, for sure, because it's that simply
It's the
that's not
extraction.
acceptable.
The extraction is the
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, exactly. So I think that we have. I like this because, again, I'm a systems thinker, and so I'm seeing all of these things happening. If we can focus on connecting the dots around this, and I'm going to reach out to a couple of folks that may have some influence or that might be interested, because I think that's what we need to enlarge the conversation. But pull into this conversation folks that are keenly interested, have some influence, and actually want to move this forward.
Yes, that would be great. And I firmly believe that if we don't approach anything by having a human-centric lens, we've lost the battle. That's part one. Part two is, how do we measure success? Is it based on how much we're spending? Then what's the return? What are the performance metrics for every program? They're not defined. How do we know we're doing the right thing? So that's the next piece, is what's it all for? Why are we doing what we're doing, and how do we know we're doing it well?
No, you nailed it, because we have to firstly establish a few. Okay, what's in it for me? And I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about whoever we
Great.
want to put into this. What's in it
Yeah.
for me?
Why would they change? Yeah.
Yes. And then, connecting all of these dots that for this effort, you can have all of this positive impact instead of the way you've been doing things. The same effort gets you a little trickle here, right? So again, helping them see this intertwined bigger picture. And I absolutely, well, there's two things. There's technology and the physical environment that connects everything. We live in Canada after all, right? We live on Earth. So these two themes, and they wrap together as well. So if we point this out and kind of draw the picture where investing in certain areas will have this huge impact because they're connected, and how this investment should be allowed to be by citizens for citizens, right?
Yes.
So anyway,
I love that, Kathleen. If you brought more people that are aligned, that have to be systems thinkers. If they can't look at all the moving pieces and understand how they come together and the value behind it, then that's a challenge. And just through this discussion, what I'm envisioning is, say if we are starting with the academic institutions, and in compressing the hierarchy of that, you take the vice chancellors or the vice presidents, make them liaison officers with industry. Each faculty has a specific industry they focus on. For example, you take the model that we're developing in terms of being able to introduce a chief entrepreneurial officer or chief entrepreneur officer in a university to help bring this together and shift the way to make them relevant, and then having one of us responsible for every province to start implementing this, and then being able to grow that influence in terms of standing shoulder to shoulder to create that change. So that's just what came I was thinking of in the last few minutes, and to keep this going. But I see how it's possible, and it'll all depend on messaging. It's market. Everything's marketing in some way too, in terms
Yeah.
of what's resonating, what's not, being able to collect that
Well,
feedback and shift our messaging.
I was going to say timing is very important too. Because,
Yes.
you know, we
Yes.
all learn these are all wonderful ideas, but until the pain is
That's it.
unbearable. So I think about, like, I read your document and I think, okay, today, if you wanted to affect post-secondary change based on the very little I know, you'd have to come at it from a political point of view with the purse strings from the provinces, which
Yeah.
50% fund. Whereas 2 years from now or 3 years from now, you'll just be able to walk in the front door of the university.
That's it.
You know,
And
like they're not going to course correct without some
right.
outside, thinking, right? Like they've had more than enough time to to dig the hole. So to
That,
me,
yeah. Try to
timing is
sell
timing's
umbrellas before the
interesting.
rain, or selling
Yeah,
umbrellas.
and and I mean, if you show up and say we're going to flatten your hierarchy,
No.
and you're holding the purse strings from the government, they might say, well, we don't really want to, but I guess we have to if we want our money.
And it's
Whereas
not that.
if
That's
you
not.
showed up, yeah, it's
That's
like,
not the initial
yeah, yeah.
conversation.
I
It's
work I work very hard to get into this position, and you want to take it away from me, like
yeah.
hell,
That's
I'll
it.
fight
Well,
It's
you. Yeah,
incremental change. The first change
yeah,
is introducing the idea of how to become more relevant and use talent and
yeah.
IP to support industry and commercialize.
yeah, we have
Well,
to
like,
spin the positive, and we are
yeah,
aware, intensely aware, of all of the organizational politics. So, which is
right, right.
good.
You don't need to talk about them or address them. You need to go do
No,
positive.
we have to, but knowing
Yeah,
that, I think will really allow us to focus on the right positive messages.
yeah.
And I think that's key because, nothing sells better than a positive what's in it for me.
Yes.
Well, the
That's it.
commercialization as a service model is a win-win
Yeah,
for everybody. And if you want to
Yes.
show up on the doorstep with something where people are going to benefit from it, and the way I sell it is, let's not touch anything that you're currently doing.
yeah,
Let's introduce something that's always been missing,
yeah,
a path for research scientists to benefit monetarily that didn't exist if they didn't want to be an entrepreneur. And it's that simple. Like, that's the realization is that there's no path for non-entrepreneurial researchers to benefit monetarily from their work. And so we're forcing them into being entrepreneurs, which is an oxymoron if you think they're a PhD researcher. And we're actually publicly funding entrepreneurial programs for postdocs because there's too many of them. Like, no, that's not, no, you need to build a system that they can benefit from without being entrepreneurs. And
yeah.
I'm dumbfounded why I'm having such a hard time getting that message across.
We have to find an open mind and the right ear. So
Yeah,
I'm poking around with a couple of political organizations to see if um if there's uptake, and if there is, what they
yeah,
see that uptake is looking like, because I also don't want to get associated with the wrong group that's this is going to be a drag. We need
Well,
word
and
in.
okay, so here's a test for you. So I would say unions actually benefit more than anybody downstream.
Yeah,
Um, but do they have the emotional intelligence to realize that,
that's a
commercializing
good
more
point.
innovation domestically is what pays for all of the public infrastructure that creates unionized jobs. And there was a guy in BC, I think he was the head of the QP. Is he on the pension fund or something? He's in Nanaimo, Lansdale, retired guy. He ran this, 10% program where he was going around the province showing people that if they spent money locally, it would benefit
Hmm.
the infrastructure. And so that's when I first got wind of it. And I thought, oh, I would never thought of that. Like, I always kind of think unions are so separate from kind of business, but the reality is they're the ones that benefit downstream by creating better local economies. So
Yeah,
yeah, so that's an interesting one because they have a lot of money and power, um,
and influence.
and influence. So that's an interesting one that people probably don't think about. It's not just going after the business families or the tycoons.
Geez, that's such a good suggestion because we want a community. We don't want just this area. It's going to take a community, and
Yeah,
it's smart to recognize that, right? Because AI scares the shit out of people that are working. Like really, the construction industry I find scarily fascinating because there's they have not embraced technology, and yet the workers are there. There are so many emotional issues with workers in construction because of the way leadership handles things,
right,
and it's so disorganized. And one of the reasons that we spend time introducing lean to the building industry is it's all about collaboration, it's all about working together, it's all about you know solving things together. It's not competitive. So stop fucking competing because you're just making
right,
life nasty for everybody, including yourself. And again, it's focusing on the people side of things, and that's where the influence is. Yes, they need technology. So I've actually been talking to some technology companies in the building space and saying,
yeah,
okay, can you do this? Can you do that? Because we have gaps here, here, here. And so I've had a few of those conversations, but I don't think they're Canadian. They could
right.
be.
Well, and I guess that's the other thing around all of this conversation is it takes an amount of acceptance of social engineering. So
Yeah.
there's always going to be somebody that'll say, oh, well, that's just too much social engineering or overreach, and it's like, well, actually, I think we're at the point where we need that sort of kind of social engineering to get some of these models back on track.
Well,
And you're right. So if you say, here are the five leakages, in the construction industry around technology, we need to invest. Like, I think if we think about public as ours, we own it and democratically we decide, like maybe that's what's missing in the dialogue that, we have to take ownership of the public
you
domain
know,
because,
you nailed
you
it.
know, yeah, because there's something, it's not socially engineering. It's basically saying these are our resources and if we move it in this direction.
Yeah.
So if you're, I mean, software, like, and again, you're dealing with the jobs issue, like that's been talked about for years now that, if you invite these multinationals into your city, you get increased taxes overnight and you create jobs. However, they're going to leave a hole the size of Texas if they ever leave your city. When they pull out, and you see that in retail. In the last decade, we've seen a lot of that in retail, and now we'll see it in tech because what's going to happen is, Google's going to realize that Canada isn't the dev shop they were hoping it was as things get more sophisticated. So they're going to move to other countries and suddenly that, you've gutted that workforce because it isn't built on local living economy.
Yeah.
So these
So
are hard political issues because it's way easier just to sign one document and have Google show up and rent space and hire 500 people at above average, incomes, right?
That's
I
a
was gonna,
dog to kick.
I was going to
It's
tell you
hard.
that
We're saying it's hard work.
I subscribe to probably, or maybe I mentioned this earlier. I subscribe to at least 5 different economists, and they come from different parts of the world. And I do because I think the root cause of the ailment in society today is economics. I really do, and it has been for decades. So, at any rate, just if you have an interest, I'll flip to you the YouTube channel for Steve Keen. He's from the UK. He has frequent chats with his buddy in Australia, and he's funny as shit. And he also has he's developed this software. It's just double entry accounting. It's such a great way to illustrate the flow of money, whether it's taxes, whether it doesn't matter.
Right.
He captures it all, but he's funny. He's also on Substack, so I'll flip you his YouTube channel, and because I think if we can weave into this discussion uh, some, and I was going to say basic economics. What I've come to understand is economics are not understood. So, but
Right.
if we can weave into the argument,
By design. Yeah.
yes, exactly. At any rate, I think you guys will enjoy him and his buddy and actually what he has to say. But I think that needs to be part of the narrative that we
Yeah.
approach others with, the sales pitch, if you will, right?
Right. Right. No, and that's a good point because there's definitely multiple camps that are
Yeah.
constantly in conflict, whether it's the right or left think tanks, talking about this or that. The the issue around climate is a good example of that. That it's really hard to have a definitive answer because there's so many competing bodies of expertise, including economists, telling us it's not real, it's real. It's it's like, well, what's the answer?
Yeah.
They
Well,
leave you the economists leave you in a state of confusion. That it's like we need LNG, and then the other one tells you that LNG is destroying the planet.
I
It's like, well, which one's right?
I think that we can probably, and this is my thinking on this, because I agree with you. There's too much, but we have to talk about the investments and the cost. Firstly, the costs of fighting fires and the investments in industries to recover from these huge tracts of land that have been disturbed and killed because of fires, and what impact that has. And it doesn't matter, but most of the science isn't seen, right? Because it has to do with environmental things. Other things grow, and we're too self-centered. So
Right.
Regenerative. It's a natural regenerative process for the
yeah,
earth.
yeah, exactly. So, but the costs to humans because of this, that, and the other thing, and even though there are some politicians that just blame arsonists, who gives a rat's ass how it started? The fact is that it started and it took off and it's still
Yeah.
going. And then the cost of, all of the smoke in the air and how far it travels and so on. We just start linking those dots. Frankly, I don't want to go there, but if we need to convince um, people in charge of sums of money how to better manage these things, then we'll have to go there. But
NASA's got new
What if
technology on satellites that can identify this. It's all automated. And
and I think this is the kind of thing about bringing data forward to the public space. And I've talked about this idea of public accessible value stream mapping. Like,
yeah,
you know because we're not privy or have the ability to capture all this data, how is it brought? And there's a great example of that from that organization that's lobbying the government. They did a really nice infograph on how money is brought into the government and how it's spent, and they put a website up, and it stuff like that. I thought, oh yeah, that's super easy to understand. It's it's a simple infographic. Like we need more of that as citizens, so we can start kind of questioning. And forest fires is a good example. Like what is the what is the, like, I don't know anything about it other than smoke makes beautiful sunsets. Like there's things that we need to understand so we can actually talk about them and not necessarily just rely on other people to solve these. And so yeah, I think bringing forward the data is kind of one of the most important things we could do at this point.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
that
also the conversation of what is in the realm of possible that can be influenced by us and others to create change versus what's too big, or going after the big stuff. And I, Kathleen, have a background in economics. I always look at it's a social science. There's the micro side that looks at incentives.
yeah
Fines, jail time is all microeconomics. And then I'm always speaking in short, medium, and long term because of that sort of training, the academic training of looking at it, forecasting it, because you could have a loss in the short term, but have a gain in the long run, depending on the main factors for output for GDP, which is consumption, investment, savings, and then net export. So that's how I break things down when I'm thinking of how does it work? What is we doing here? And I use one specific model that academics would probably frown at, but it's the ISLM model, which looks at aggregate money supply and then GDP and plugging in those different factors to map it out, which is how I had um, I had no carry forward in my budgets because I would always forecast everything from labor to understand the economy, material supply, all these things, and be able to balance it across my portfolio of projects and assets, economics.
Yeah,
and
for
your
sure.
colleagues probably didn't like you doing that because they wanted you
No, because I made them look bad, and then I would also
exactly.
accelerate
Yeah,
work and eat up their surpluses at the end of the year.
yeah, exactly. But
Timeline.
I was thinking about, the other thing is to really kind of think about this 2B gap analysis or the idea of a North Star. So, for example, when I saw that infograph, where my mind went, and again, these are just thinking exercises, I thought, okay, well, let's think about this politically. What could we do to decrease the tax rates while increasing the revenue? And then if you add in ecologic limits, human flourishing, like these are the kind of things that I wish were more publicly thought about, or at least maybe they are and we just don't know. But I thought, okay, like how could you build, again using a leakage analysis, how could you build domestic sovereignty that increased the revenue while decreasing the tax rates, and why is that not the North Star of a political party to say, hey, we figured out that if we invest in this, we can actually increase the revenue by decreasing the corporate and personal rates? Because 50% taxes, that's ludicrous. I mean, the deficits, that's ludicrous. Like, I mean, at what point do we tell them they can't, have more than a X amount of deficit? Like this kind of unbounded spending is it's like, why is this not in check? And then when they talk about how they influence the economy, none of it's working. I mean, the investments are all, but they keep happening. Like the money they're flooding into these programs that aren't working. It's like, what the heck's going on? So yeah, I
So
think I think getting that North Star is probably another really important part of this.
I think the timing is absolutely brilliant here because of focus on Canadian.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think
economic sovereignty is actually important,
it's totally important. Well, but production sovereignty is important. We have
right? Yeah,
so much potential that we've just idled through and we haven't thought about it. So if we start connecting the dots, east, west, north, I think that we'll have an opportunity. And I'm Peter, I'm glad you brought environment into this, or climate, because, you know, having spent so much time in Canada's north, things are changing up there. Changing in a way that is probably both concerning and positive. So it's everything. The timing is right. The timing is absolutely right. And I think that we can take advantage of the current political worldly situation, the chaos
Yeah.
out there, to really push this narrative. Because if it helps move Canada together forward, and if we can just, you know, map out some of the ways to do that, that is going to benefit everybody.
Now, if we can do it without taking credit, looking for compensation,
Yeah.
giving it, you know, good ideas to people that are listening and implementing, that's the win. Because I look at these lobby groups and I think, no, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just come up with really good ideas. Like Cass is a great example. It's like I'm just dying for somebody to take Cass and say, all right, this is defensible. Let's argue about it and then decide if we're going to write policy around it. Go back and check in to make sure that we haven't got too off track, you know, once we got a hold of it. And if nobody ever knows I designed it, all the better. You know, it's like,
Cool,
just
because
get her done.
what an invite to politicians. We'll do the
Yeah.
work, you take the credit. But just
Exactly.
done.
Well, that's what I realized just kind of watching the province, where I thought it's gotten to the point where it's more about PR and virtue signaling and vote buying than it is about good governance or good
Yes.
law.
It is.
And I thought, okay, well, you know, again, the judo move is to go do cool stuff and just let them take all the credit, but then don't even lobby them. Like basically go do cool stuff, and then when they come grabbing a hold of it for the PR, it's like, yeah, go ahead, you know, take my name off of it, and I don't want to be in your photo ops, you know. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, so I think that is the being the ninja, you know, and just doing it
It's
for the right reasons, right? You know, it's
yeah,
like, yeah, no
it's
marketing required.
the underground ninja. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, that's how you're going to get things done. Whether you know, if the minute you try and hold on to it all, just
Oh,
fail. Right?
totally. Yeah.
I
And
wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to be, you know, rich or famous. I mean, those aren't attributes that you know, that seem very enjoyable at the end of it.
Well, I have to agree with that, which is kind of interesting because I'm not here for either wealth
Yeah,
or exposure. Not this place in my life. I just
no,
really, really, really enjoy
yeah.
meeting
You want to do good work, yeah, and do
meeting
good work.
interesting people, having great conversations, and moving, you know, important things forward. Like,
Yeah,
I like creating the wins, but I also understand the need to generate revenue from any of these efforts to be able to sustain it, to hire people for the messaging, to alleviate pressures. So I can just focus on my highest and best use and not all the other crap that makes me tired and I don't want to do. So even thinking through, say, working with universities to de-risk it for them, to incentivize bringing you on, say, in this fractional chief entrepreneur officer role to be able to take a percentage of any gains they get. So again, always thinking win-win. So
but
I've got
yeah, and I'll just add to that for clarity that there's nothing wrong with bringing wealth towards you, but then you're redistributing it.
yes.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah,
when I say rich, I mean I don't want to hoard $14 billion. You know, it's like I want money to flow through me like hot lava, and you know, send it to where it's going to do good. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Totally.
Deploy every
Human
dollar.
human flourishing is important.
Well, and there it is, but there's also expenses to getting things
Yeah.
done. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
That's what
that,
I mean. Yeah. So for clarity, you know,
yeah.
we don't want money to flow through us. We just don't want it to stop at us.
Yes. Yeah. Hey, this is exciting.
Yes, and intended to be 45 minutes, sometimes go to an hour. We've almost made it to 2 hours, but let's call it a day and
All right.
start putting some of these things into place.
Yeah, well, I think we already have a significant list of things that we've talked about, and I think we need to probably jot that down to fill out this larger picture and connect the dots here, because I know I keep things keep coming up in my head, and I think I should stick it in a software, but I
And
need.
trust me, every one of these calls, I'm scribbling things down. I leverage AI. This is all being mapped out in some way
Good.
based on the need or the path that's needed. So yeah, this is not going to waste. It's also being put up on YouTube.
Hinesh is our lean leader.
Perfect.
And again,
Well,
it's the impact I'm after, even having supper with my parents, and I work very long days. And in terms of with clients, what I'm doing and what I want to create or see as a legacy or problems where I just can't stand back, because I firmly believe if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So I'm driven to do these things. And I realize that as I'm telling them, like, why don't you just do this or sell off some properties and just live life? And I'm like, well, if then someone comes up to me and says they have a problem, I won't be able to help myself, and I'll just get sucked back into. I know that this is it. I'm doing the right thing, and to just remind myself that it's a choice when I feel stressed, tired, or frustrated to realize I'm doing this on purpose.
Yeah, nice.
Okay,
Well,
thanks.
we love and admire you for all your efforts. So don't ever
totally.
change.
Thank you. And likewise, that admiration and respect goes out to both of you as well, because it's these ideas, and no one's got all the answers. It's coming together, and for us to bounce ideas and critique them and look at
Yeah,
objectively to do what we want to do.
I think
get
it's
beyond the
just
problem.
it's amazing that we've connected. Like, how did that happen, eh?
And this is what I messaged Peter, but the connection I had yesterday with a member of parliament that is tightly rooted to academia. Uh, it's serendipitous. So
Serendipity, indeed. Yeah, for sure. That's a positive thing.
it is. Okay, well, enjoy yourselves. Get some sunlight, and I'll see you guys next week.
Great meeting. Thanks a lot.
Take care.